I was on my usual patrol when the alarm came in. It was from an old office building, had been converted into a doctor's office with a small pharmacy attached. Nothing unusual about that. Alarms go off all the time. Sometimes it's an animal setting it off. Sometimes it's just faulty wiring. My partner was tied up elsewhere, so I went alone. The key holder met me at the front, a nervous-looking man clutching a set of keys like a lifeline. "It's just the usual," he said, trying to sound confident. I didn't doubt him. I've been doing this long enough to know the difference between a real threat and someone's imagination. We entered the building. The front doors shut behind us with a hollow click, and the faint scent of dust and stale air hit my nose. I could barely see. Overhead lights flickered, casting shadows along the empty hallways. "Stay sharp," I muttered to myself. We tried the stairs first. Locked, of course. So we took the elevator up to the second floor. As the doors opened, a pitch-black hallway greeted us. One overhead light at the far end buzzed weakly, barely illuminating the corridor. I motioned to the key holder, and he hesitated. "All the offices are locked?" I asked. "Yes," he replied, his voice trembling. I started checking each room. Empty. No signs of anyone, no movement, just dusty chairs, old paperwork, and a faint smell of antiseptic. I was about to tell the key holder we were clear when I noticed something odd. The overhead light at the end of the hall, the one that had been flickering, was now off. Another light closer to the elevator flickered on. My stomach dropped. I turned to the key holder. He was pale, eyes wide. "What?" I whispered. "All those doors we just checked, they're open," he said. I froze. Every single office door I'd just verified as locked now stood open, as if someone had been moving through them, opening each door with deliberate intent. My heart started pounding. We moved quickly, checking each office again, securing them as we went. I tried to convince myself it was some kind of mechanical failure. Maybe the doors weren't locking properly. But instinct told me it wasn't that simple. When we finished, the main door slammed shut behind us with a deafening bang. Our radios started crackling, filling the hallway with static. I wanted to run, but I had to check the front, had to make contact with the key holder. Then it hit me. The key holder, the one who had let us in, was nowhere to be seen. I called dispatch, voice tight, explaining what was happening. "Ma'am, he's still on the way," came the reply. "ETA, 5 minutes. I felt my blood run cold. "But he's already with me." I yelled into the radio. Dispatch repeated the same thing, calm, unwavering. "Sir, the key holder has just made contact with us. He's still en route." A chill ran down my spine. That's when the real key holder arrived. Female, slightly older than me, with an air of authority that demanded attention. I asked her about the man who had brought us in. She frowned. "Describe him," she said. I did. She blinked, then her face went pale. "That sounds like Dr. Hall," she said, voice trembling. "He committed suicide at his summer home 3 days ago." I swallowed hard, my mind racing. The man who had guided me through the building, who had stood beside me, was dead. And yet, he had been there, or at least I had seen him there. It was a crisp autumn evening in northern Ohio, and I had just finished my late shift at the station. The leaves had begun to turn, painting the suburban roads with streaks of gold and crimson. It was one of those nights where the air felt alive, charged with a tension I couldn't place. I had been called in for a routine patrol, nothing major, just a quiet neighborhood on the outskirts of town. As I cruised down Maple Drive, the faint hum of the police radio was the only sound besides the tires on wet asphalt. I felt a twinge of unease, the kind that makes the hair on the back of your neck stand up. Normally, this part of town was quiet at night, almost eerily so, but tonight felt different. I rounded the corner near the old forest that bordered the neighborhood. Its trees stood like silent sentinels, their branches tangled and reaching toward the sky. I had passed this area hundreds of times, but tonight the darkness seemed heavier, thicker. My headlights barely pierced the shadows, and every crackle from the radio sounded sharper, louder. Then I saw it, a figure crouched at the edge of the woods, just beyond the reach of my headlights. At first, I thought it was an animal, maybe a stray dog or a raccoon. But the shape was too human, too deliberate. It didn't move as animals did. It just watched. I slowed, trying to make out details. It was a man, or at least it looked like a man, tall, thin, wearing dark clothing that blended almost perfectly with the night. His face was obscured, and I couldn't see eyes or expression, only the stillness. A chill ran down my spine. I radioed into dispatch. Unit 43, I have a possible trespasser at the edge of the woods near Maple Drive. I'm going to investigate. My voice was calm, professional, but my hands were tight on the wheel, knuckles white. As I stepped out of the cruiser, the figure vanished. No movement, no sound, just gone. I scanned the tree line, flashlight in hand, heart hammering. The wind rustled leaves, snapping branches, and I could have sworn I saw shadows flicker in the corners of my vision. "Hello," I called, voice steady despite the pounding of my heart. "This is Officer Miller. Step out where I can see you." Silence. I edged closer, flashlight cutting swaths of light through the underbrush. Then I heard it, a low, wet scraping sound from behind a cluster of trees. I spun, shining the light, but saw nothing. My stomach churned. Something wasn't right. I stepped back toward the cruiser, reasoning with myself. Probably a kid messing around, or an animal, I muttered. But the rational voice in my head was drowned out by the instinctual fear curling through my body. Suddenly, there was a crack of movement from the woods to my left. I pivoted, gun drawn, flashlight swinging. A figure stepped out, tall, masked, holding what looked like an axe. My breath caught in my throat. "Drop it," I yelled, voice shaking despite my training. The figure froze. Then another emerged, then another. My light swept across the clearing, and I realized I was surrounded. 10, maybe 12 people, all masked, all armed, all silently closing in. Every instinct screamed at me to run, to get back to my car, to radio for backup. But my feet felt rooted to the ground. I raised my gun, hand shaking, fingers tightening on the trigger. "Go away." One of them finally spoke, muffled, deep, chilling. Not a threat, not a demand, but the tone, it was almost kind. My heart sank. I knew if he hadn't said that, I might not have made it out. I backed up, slowly, eyes never leaving the circle of masked strangers. Each step felt like dragging lead, my adrenaline spiking. I reached my cruiser and dove in, slamming the door and locking it. The figures didn't move immediately. They just stood there, watching, as if waiting for something. Then, as quickly as they had appeared, they melted into the shadows of the woods, leaving only the echo of their presence. I called for backup, voice tight, trying to steady my breathing. Dispatch was confused, asking for details, but I could barely speak. I described the masks, the axes, the way they disappeared. By the time the first unit arrived, there was nothing. Not a trace, not a footprint, not a sound. The neighborhood was quiet again, too quiet. I couldn't shake the feeling of being watched after that night. Every patrol through that area, even during the day, felt different. Shadows seemed heavier, sound sharper. I began noticing things I hadn't before, scratches on trees, patterns in the leaves, footprints that didn't match any human or animal I recognized. Weeks later, I got a call from a local resident. "Officer, you know the woods off Maple Drive?" he said, voice trembling. "People have been disappearing. Disappearing." The word echoed in my mind. The missing persons hadn't been reported publicly yet, and the details were scarce. I drove to the site, flashlight in hand, scanning the forest with renewed apprehension. The ground was disturbed in strange ways, like paths that appeared overnight. The smell, faint metallic, made my stomach turn. I realized then that what I had stumbled upon was not just a group of masked individuals. It was something organized, deliberate, and far older than any of us could understand. A secret society operating in the shadows, waiting for unsuspecting victims. I reported everything to my captain, but he dismissed it. "Could be pranksters, could be kids with costumes," he said. But I knew better. I felt their presence, smelled it, seen the precision with which they moved. This wasn't random. This was hunting. I tried to push it out of my mind, focusing on paperwork, patrols, normal life. But the dreams came. Masked faces, axes glinting in the dark, whispers in the trees. Every night, I relived that circle, the deep fear that had rooted in my chest when one of them had said those words. "Go away." I started noticing odd things in my home. Footsteps in the attic, doors I remembered locking unlocked, the faint smell of earth and leaves. I couldn't tell if it was paranoia or if they had followed me home. Every shadow became a potential threat. One night, I patrolled Maple Drive alone. The wind was low, the trees swaying gently. As I rounded the corner near the forest, I saw movement again, just at the edge, half hidden by shadows. My flashlight trembled in my hand. Then I understood something I hadn't before. They weren't hunting randomly. They were testing me, watching me, waiting for the moment when I would falter. When I would show fear outside the confines of my patrol, they would step in. I left the woods that night, but the feeling didn't leave me. Every patrol since, every encounter with the unknown, every shadow in the trees reminds me that I am being watched. And I know that one day, if I'm not careful, I might not get to leave at all. The woods are still there, quiet, dark, waiting. People say they've seen things moving in the corner of their vision, shadows that vanish when approached. Some even whisper of the masked circle, though nobody knows who they are or what they want. I do, and I know one thing for certain. The next person who drives past those trees might not be as lucky as I was. I have been a police officer in a small Midwestern town for nearly 15 years. In all that time, I thought I had seen it all: drunk drivers, domestic disputes, even the occasional burglary. But nothing prepared me for the call I received on a rainy October night. It started like any other shift. The hum of fluorescent lights in the precinct, the occasional crackle of the radio, and the quiet murmurs of dispatch operators processing reports. Around 11:45 p.m., my radio buzzed to life with a call I would never forget. Unit 12, we have reports of strange activity at the old Caldwell property on Elm Street. Neighbors report lights flickering inside the abandoned house, shadows moving past the windows, and strange noises coming from the attic. Proceed with caution. I glanced at my partner, James, a seasoned officer who had seen enough to not flinch at most things. He raised an eyebrow. "Sounds like kids messing around," he said, though even he didn't sound completely convinced. "I don't know, James. Elm Street's always been quiet. That house has been abandoned for years. The neighbors rarely call for anything serious," I replied, grabbing my flashlight and keys. By the time we arrived, the rain had turned into a steady downpour. Water streamed down the deserted street, pooling in potholes and reflecting the flickering streetlights. The Caldwell property sat at the end of the block, its wooden exterior warped and weathered from decades of neglect. Windows were shattered, the front door sagging on its hinges. Every instinct in my body screamed at me that something wasn't right. We parked and approached cautiously. The neighbors' reports had mentioned the attic lights, so I kept my flashlight sweeping from the ground floor to the upper windows. At first, nothing. But then, a flicker, a movement in the corner of the largest upstairs window. It was too deliberate to be a shadow cast by the storm. Someone or something was inside. I motioned for James to stay behind me as we approached the front door. It creaked under my hand as I pushed it open, and a damp, musty smell hit me immediately. Water dripped from the ceiling, puddles forming on the warped wooden floors. The entire house felt alive, groaning under its own decay. "Hello, police," I called out, voice echoing through the empty rooms. Silence. Only the drip of water and the sound of rain outside responded. We moved carefully, clearing each room as we went. Empty. Every step made the floorboards creak, and I found myself jumping at every tiny sound. James was tense, flashlight sweeping corners, eyes darting at every shadow. As we approached the staircase to the second floor, a sudden sound made me freeze. A soft, deliberate thump, like someone moving across the floor above. My heart leapt. "Upstairs," I whispered to James. We climbed cautiously, flashlights cutting through the darkness. The upper floor was worse. Walls covered in peeling wallpaper, floors warped and slick from the rain seeping through the roof. We reached the hallway, shining light into each room. Empty. Then we reached the attic door. A faint, low hum emanated from behind it, almost like chanting. My pulse quickened. I nudged the door open, and the beam from my flashlight swept across the space. At first, nothing. Then I noticed them. Figures. standing silently, lined up along the far wall. 5 of them, all wearing hooded cloaks, faces obscured in shadow. Their heads turned slowly, in unison, to face me. "Police," I said, keeping my voice steady despite the fear tightening my chest. Step forward, hands where I can see them. They didn't move, didn't breathe visibly, just watched. My training told me to back up, to retreat, to call for backup, but something compelled me to stay. My flashlight beam trembled, revealing long, gnarled hands folded in front of them. "James," I whispered. Before he could respond, one of the figures moved, not toward us, but in a way that made my stomach twist. They lifted a hand and pointed directly at me. Then the chanting began, low and guttural, vibrating in the walls. My ears rang, and I had to fight to keep from covering my head. Suddenly, the room seemed larger, the shadows deeper. The figures began to dissolve, like smoke caught in the light. And then, all at once, they were gone. James and I looked at each other, disbelief etched across both our faces. What the hell was that?" he asked, voice shaking. "I don't know," I admitted. My mind raced, trying to make sense of what we had just witnessed. "We need to report this. Now." But when we descended the stairs, the house had changed. Furniture we hadn't noticed before appeared in the rooms. Old chairs, tables, even an altar-like structure in the living room. The windows, which had been shattered, were now intact, reflecting our panicked faces back at us. I called dispatch, my voice tight. "Unit 12. We need immediate backup at the Caldwell property. Something isn't right here." The dispatcher's voice was calm. "Unit 12, the property is abandoned. No one else is on site. Proceed with caution. Over." I hung up, frustration mingling with fear. This wasn't normal. This wasn't procedural. This was something else. Something older. Something that had been waiting for someone to enter. As we exited the house, I felt it. Eyes. Watching us. From the trees surrounding the property. Unseen but undeniably present. The rain had stopped, leaving a damp, heavy silence. James and I didn't speak, didn't breathe louder than necessary. Every instinct screamed at us to leave, and we did, racing back to our cruiser, doors locking automatically, lights flashing in warning. We called for backup again. Officers arrived within minutes, but the house was just normal. Windows shattered, floors warped, but no altar, no figures, no chanting. Only the creak of the old house, settling back into its decay. We investigated for weeks. Neighbors had noticed lights flickering, shadows, and strange noises, but there was no evidence. No footprints, no signs of entry. It was as if the house had swallowed the figures, the chanting, the fear itself. Months later, I returned alone, unable to resist the pull of the unknown. The house was empty, silent, abandoned. But I felt it, the eyes in the shadows, watching from just beyond perception. I couldn't explain it. I couldn't rationalize it. And I never returned after that night. Now, whenever I patrol at night, I drive past the Caldwell property slowly, lights scanning the forest line. And sometimes, just sometimes, I swear I see movement in the windows, figures standing silently, watching, waiting. I've come to accept that some things are beyond understanding. Some places are meant to be left alone. But the Caldwell house, it's patient. It remembers. And it waits for the next soul foolish enough to enter. They say police officers see the world differently. Some call it experience, some call it curse. What I'm about to share isn't about traffic tickets or petty crimes. These are the nights that haunt you, when the darkness isn't just outside the patrol car. It's inside, watching, waiting, and sometimes it's smarter than you. One call can change everything, and sometimes survival isn't about skill, it's about luck. I've been a cop in a small Georgia town for over 15 years by the time that night happened. Most nights, patrolling the dirt roads is monotonous, occasionally broken up by drunks, barking dogs, or a domestic argument that ends with a loud door slam. But this night was different. It started just like any other, slow, quiet, the kind of night where the only sound is the hum of your own tires against the asphalt. I was in my cruiser, lights off, just listening to the engine and the faint chirping of cicadas. That stretch of road had tiny woods on either side, dense enough to hide anything or anyone. That's when I saw it. Movement on the left side of the road. Someone, or something, jumped into the woods. I only caught a glimpse of half a figure, then nothing. Instinct told me to pull closer. I flipped the spotlight on, scanning the tree line. Nothing. My hand hovered near my holster. I called out softly, "Police! Step out where I can see you." Silence. Just the wind through the trees and the crunch of leaves under my boots. I stepped out of the car. The night air was heavy, thick with the smell of wet pine and earth. Each crack of a branch sent my heart into my throat, but I knew it was my job. I kept calling, my voice cracking slightly under tension. Then, a figure slowly emerged from behind a tree. Masked. Tall. Menacing. "Take off the mask," I yelled. Nothing. They just stared at me, tilting their head like a predator sizing up prey. My gun was out now, aimed carefully. Then I heard footsteps, right side of me. Another masked figure, this one holding an axe. Panic clawed at me, but I forced myself to stay steady. Footsteps all around. I realized I was surrounded. Not 2, not 3, but at least 10 masked strangers, forming a circle with only one exit behind me. Some held axes, others machetes, but they weren't charging. Yet. One of them spoke. Deep, muffled, almost unnatural. "Go away." The tone didn't just sound like a command. It was a warning. My chest tightened. I knew if I hesitated, the warning wouldn't matter. My hand shook as I slowly turned toward the exit, keeping my gun raised. I ran, heart hammering, adrenaline drowning out every rational thought. Half a mile down the dirt road, I called for backup. By the time the squad arrived, the group had vanished. The woods were empty, silent, like nothing had happened. The only trace was the imprint of 10 pairs of boots pressed into the dirt, fading into nothing. That night, I didn't sleep. I couldn't. Even years later, I replayed it in my head. The masks, the weapons, the way they moved in unison, coordinated yet silent. I had a theory. A terrifying one. Some kind of secret society, hiding in plain sight, testing, hunting, practicing. If I hadn't been a cop, I don't think I'd be alive.